There comes a point in every god's career when you look at yourself, all 40,000 cubic miles of you, and think, this could be managed better. Mortals call it self-improvement. Deities call it containment optimization. I call it squatting gracefully in the ribcage of the universe. For context, I don't actually sleep. Not properly. I submerge. I marinate in the tectonic broth of our lie, while my avatars exfoliate the apocalypse from my scales. It's an elaborate operation. Shifts, rotations, abyssal rinse cycles, hydrological audits. Somewhere between divine hygiene and a nautical OSHA violation written in blood and barnacles. They work in teams, of course. Team A handles dental. They brush the teeth that dream of eating sons. Team B trims the beard that occasionally grows continents if I roll over. Wrong. Team C manages the molting schedule for my tentacles. Yes, I shed. No, I'm not related to snakes. And no, the shed isn't for sale. The last time someone tried, the CIA classified it as a top-secret organism, and then lost the paperwork. Technically, it's been running for president ever since. Anyway, every few centuries the team insists on holding a safety meeting about what they call spontaneous surfacing events, because occasionally, my body likes to stretch and greet the sun like a drifting cataclysm. I call that breathing. They call it global flood risk. Bureaucracy ruins everything, even respiration. I used to take pride in the system, you know. It was elegant, efficient. I would slumber while 1,000 mirrored versions of myself busied around my sleeping form. Overqualified janitors with a god complex and no sense of humor. It was harmony, of a sort. A perfectly synchronized ballet of me cleaning me. But pride, like entropy, attracts paperwork. And sure enough, eventually the union formed. Yes, my own avatars unionized. Against me. Apparently, working for an infinite dreamer with no dental benefits constitutes an unfair labor practice. I tried to explain that dental is redundant when one's mouth doubles as a pocket dimension, but the grievance paperwork was already filed in triplicate and notarized by a jellyfish. I offered them eternal gratitude. They countered with overtime. So after millennia of exfoliating my body of many dimensions and debating paid leave with smaller, louder versions of myself, I reached a revelation. Eliminate the middle manager. If I could store the sleeping body like a sardine, I could silence the workforce. In theory, a perfect system. In practice, it was me attempting to downsize myself, which, as history would show, rarely ends quietly. A simple idea. Bold, efficient, and cosmically stupid. I ordered a Connex, a divine shipping container 40 miles long, forged from temple surplus and bureaucratic despair. The invoice alone required a blood signature, 3 soul stamps, and a note from Yogg-So Thoth's finance department reading, "Don't call us if it moves." I spent an afternoon tethering the Connex to my interdimensional library as it drifted through space. My reasoning was sound. If my physical form were attached to my place of work, I could monitor it remotely. I could be both employee and facility. Perfectly self-sustaining. Now my primary avatar, Cthulhu the Librarian, the version of me with just enough ego to hold a management position, could finally live his best life. All the freedom of consciousness, none of the body maintenance. My real self would simply trail behind in a tin can the size of an underperforming continent. Efficient, elegant, and most importantly, no supervision. Finally, I told myself I could take a nap without oversight. I sealed the last rune. The Connex hummed with containment wards as the library's gravity tether reeled it into orbit behind us. My real body, a sleeping mountain of divinity and brine, now trailed politely through the void like divine cargo. For one brief, glorious moment, I believed I had outsmarted the cosmos. I had achieved the holy grail of divine administration, separation of consciousness and consequence. I remember thinking, this is what gods are meant to feel like. Efficient to untouchable, smugly well organized. I almost drafted an email to eternity titled, "Problem Solved." Then things got weird. At first it was subtle. The Connex began to slake, not audibly but cosmically, a sort of gravitational sulk. Space around it started behaving like it missed the ocean. A faint shimmer of currents where there should have been silence. The taste of salt in the telemetry. Condensation forming on the inside of observation glass that had never known humidity. Then came little hints of guilt. Faint rumbles through the tether, like my body was clearing its throat, trying to get my attention without admitting it needed me. A few sensors even picked up distant whale song, which was impossible, unless my unconscious mass had decided to recreate its own ecosystem out of loneliness. You could almost hear it whisper in the language of waves, "Let me go home." Reality had started buffering. The upside, I noticed with some pride that my Wi-Fi improved. But then the stars dimmed. The moon developed a migraine and my main body started talking back. "Let me out," it said, in a voice I recognized far too well. I tried ignoring it, as one does with most divine manifestations of guilt. The entire Connex started thudding. Every few seconds a massive metallic clunk echoed through the tether, the way a Windows 98 logo used to bounce off the corners of a screen. If that logo weighed several continents and had rage issues. I checked the monitors. My body was awake, not fully conscious, just irritated. It was rolling inside the container like a whale with an opinion. Then came the transmission, a deep, ocean-thick rumble over comms. "Open the hatch, librarian." I'm done marinating in a vacuum. Recall me to the ocean, or I swear I'll recall you. That, I'll admit, got my attention. I tried to reason with myself, which, as it turns out, is a terrible strategy when you're nigh omnipresent. My logic was impeccable. My counter-arguments were equally impeccable. The debate reached such ferocity that the Connex began vibrating, generating enough friction to warm the surrounding ocean to latte temperature. A pod of whales filed a class action lawsuit for scalding. And then, silence. I realized belatedly that by locking my true body in a box, I'd also evicted the gravitational center of meaning. Not just from the universe, but from Alaya itself. The city had gone dark. The fish cults stopped singing. Even the bubbles looked confused. It wasn't cosmic anymore. It was domestic. The reefs were cracking. The trenches echoing like a house after you turn off the refrigerator. Too quiet. Too aware. I could practically hear the local abyssal council preparing a strongly worded email about unattended divinity and unpaid oceanic dues. That's when it hit me. Rest isn't abandonment. It's a shared ecosystem. When I moved myself out of the water, I didn't just leave the ocean. I left home. So I sighed, circled back to Earth, lowered my body back into the Pacific Ocean, and let the Connex open like a can of metaphysical tuna. My colossal body drifted free, sliding back toward the trenches of Roulier like a whale finally admitting it missed the smell of salt and bureaucracy. The waves resumed. The stars flickered, sound caught up with itself. A few delayed splashes arrived, sheepish but punctual, and I stood there in the abyssal dark, surrounded by the faint hum of functioning chaos, and felt something I rarely admit to: relief. You see, even an elder god can over-optimize. you start trimming duties, consolidating selves, cutting corners on consciousness, and before long you've outsourced your own existence. I thought I was eliminating inefficiency. Turns out, I was just deleting participation. Oh, also I did the right thing and eventually worked with the union that gave workers' rights to my avatars. Weekly scrubs reinstated as a result. Rotating shifts reapproved. Overtime authorized. The union cheered. Somewhere in the galaxy, I could hear the applause of myself, forgiving myself. And as I jetted away from Earth once more, I signed one final document, a release form of sorts. Somewhere in the dark, my true body dreams on, bubbling quietly in its briny bath, tethered by an ocean of red tape, supervised by 1,000 overworked copies of myself, who are probably gossiping about how I never exfoliate. And maybe they're right. Maybe rest isn't about efficiency. Maybe the trick to existing forever is admitting you're too much work for even yourself. Still, the tides are moving again. The whales have dropped their lawsuit. Rilia hums contentedly below, and I've accepted that some parts of me simply belong underwater, preferably the loud ones. So yeah, I've learned my lesson about delegation. Never outsource your own apocalypse. Never file for self-storage. And under no circumstances, no matter how tired you are, ever put yourself in a connex to sleep better. Trust me, the paperwork isn't worth it.